Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic podcast. The world is on fire right now.
Oh my God! Wow!
Oh my God, what is that? Oh my God! What is that?
Why are you running? Why are you running?
It seems like there's going to be a World War III. I actually saw a video by Apostate Prophet. In the video, he tries to explain how Islam gets Jesus wrong.
I have a really hard life.
I found the video to be quite fascinating and stupid, but I haven't made a video on Apostate Prophet in a while. So I figured, you know what? I think it's time I give him another whitewashing. So let's take a look and I'll make my response.
Hi everybody and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. Many of you are aware that Muslims consider Jesus an important religious figure, but they differ very much in how they respect Jesus. According to Islam, Jesus was not divine.
And he says that, Muslims don't believe, Jesus is divine. First of all, divinity of Jesus is something many Christian sects themselves deny historically.
What?
Philanthropism. This is basically a movement or early Christian so-called heretical movement that did not believe that Jesus was divine. For example, John Gresham Machen, in his book The Virgin Birth, he actually describes this belief as the following.
The belief that Jesus is merely human and that he never became divine, or that he never existed prior to his birth as a man.
You can read about this in Catholic Encyclopedia, and they basically quote the 1st century bishop Saint Irenaeus, and they say this about the Ebionites.
The doctrines of this sect are said by Irenaeus to be like those of Cerinthus and Carpocrates. They denied the divinity and the virginal birth of Christ.
Please note that all of these church fathers are from the 1st to 2nd century, right? So this is a very early heretical movement. Ebionites clearly rejected the concept of Jesus being divine. So it's not true that only Muslims rejected this belief. And what's interesting is that Arians also had a similar belief. They also did not really believe that Jesus is fully divine. They actually believed that Jesus was actually created by the Father.
He was not the Son of God. He was fully a human, merely a prophet of Allah.
Then he brings up the example of Son of God, right? He says that Muslims reject the concept of Son of God. What's funny is that you don't have to go to the Muslims to see the rejection of Son of God. A famous Christian apologist, William Lane Craig, himself denies the eternally begotten concept of Son of God.
When we speak of Christ as begotten of the Father, traditionally, this has been understood to mean that Christ is begotten of the Father in his divine nature, not as human nature, as an eternal generation of the Son. The difficulty is that that's very difficult to justify biblically. When you read what John in his gospel says about being begotten by God, he seems to be referring to his human nature. So although classic Christian doctrine is that the Son is begotten in the divine nature, I don't see that that's a biblical teaching. It seems to me that the biblical teaching is that Christ is begotten in his human nature.
So when he's saying Son of God, what he's referring to is the eternally begotten Son of God. That's the concept he's referring to, right? What's funny is that this concept is also rejected by even modern Christians such as William Lane Craig. Who in a video clear-cut says that he rejects the concept of eternally begotten Son of God. So it's not just Muslims that reject it.
Please note we Muslims reject any concept of God having a son. However, the point is he never clarifies that Christians disagree on this point. There were also Christian groups like Ebionites and other Gnostic groups which had similar belief. This shows that he either doesn't know or he's being dishonest to make Muslims seem like we have some kind of unique theological issues on this, when in reality many Christians also had similar rejection of these aspects of their theology. Yet he never criticizes the Christians on these issues, but only attacks Islam, and it only exposes his hypocrisy.
And I'm not here today to argue that he was crucified or that he wasn't crucified. That's an endless, pointless discussion, if you ask me. What I want to do today is to ask some questions. And the most important question is, why? Why was Jesus not crucified according to Islam? What's the logic in that? Other prophets were killed before Jesus, according to the Quran. The Quran repeatedly condemns the Jews as killers of prophets, without specifying which prophets exactly were killed by Jews. So according to the Islamic text itself, prophets were killed, so it is not unreasonable for a prophet to be killed.
He says that why wasn't Jesus killed? First of all, why would he be killed? Like, it makes no sense. Like, why are you expecting him to die?
I know, right?
There are many Christians that also rejected the concept of crucifixion. They were known as the Apostates. In the second treatise of Seth, which they think came from the disciple of Matthew, which says the following.
This second Mimologue mounts another dramatic piece for us in his account of the cross of Christ. For he claims that not Jesus, but Simon of Cyrene has suffered. For when the Lord was marched out of Jerusalem, as the gospel passage says, one Simon of Cyrene was compelled to bear the cross. From this he finds his trickery opportunity for composing his dramatic piece, and says Jesus changed Simon into his own form while he was bearing the cross, and changed himself unto Simon, and delivered Simon to crucifixion in his place. During Simon's crucifixion, Jesus stood opposite him unseen, laughing at the persons who were crucifying Simon, but he himself flew off to the heavenly realms after delivering Simon to crucifixion, and returned to heaven without suffering.
So here you can clearly see these Christian groups, they did not believe that Jesus was crucified. Jesus replaced himself with someone else, and then that person was crucified, which is similar to what we believe, but not exactly, because in Islam, what we believe is that there was a person who volunteered to die on his behalf. And there's another story, and this is in second treatise of Seth. This is supposedly a speech that was given by Jesus. So again, like here, you can clearly see that according to this Gnostic text, as Jesus says, that he didn't die, right? So this is interesting. So my question to Apos would be that why is it that you're accepting the Christian narrative and rejecting the Gnostic narrative? Like, why are the Christians right and the Gnostics incorrect? Right? I mean, if this is really the case, that we're going by text that is written by unknown authors, then why is this text unreliable? And why is that text reliable? I mean, it's a valid question. Like, why are the Gnostics Christians' accounts not reliable?
Some would say that according to Islamic belief, Jesus is supposed to come again for a second time, but not like the Christian form of Jesus. He's supposed to be a very Muslim Jesus who comes back and who fights for Islam, brings the end times, and then finally dies. So people could argue that him dying at that time, 2000 years ago, during the crucifixion, would be incompatible with his return. But that's not really true. According to the Quran, other people were resurrected. Jesus himself brought people back to life. Certain people lived for centuries and for undefined periods of time. It would be completely conceivable for Jesus to die on the cross 2000 years ago, but then to come back again. Allah can do anything.
Again, like, he repeats the same thing. He just assumed the Christian position and argues that, like, oh, you know,
why can't you die? Like, why can't Jesus die?
like, the thing is that what makes you think that Jesus died in the first place? You know, here he's basically committing what is known as the cherry-picking fallacy. In the Quran, there are also many incidents where the prophets were miraculously saved. As a matter of fact, the Quran is full of stories of prophets being miraculously saved. So it's not inconsistent for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save a prophet from a certain doom, right? It's completely consistent. As a matter of fact, there are so many examples. For example, there's the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he was saved from the fire. You can read about this in Quran 21:68 to 70. But basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they said, burn him and support your God if you are to act. I.e. Allah said, O fire, be coolness and safety upon Abraham. And they intended for him to plan, i.e. to harm him, but we made them the greatest losers. So basically the story goes, and you can read about this in Ibn Kathir's tafsir, when these pagans, they tried to kill off Ibrahim alayhi salam, threw him into the fire basically became cold, or it didn't hurt. So again, like, this is a very incredible example of a prophet being saved at the last minute. Same way, Jesus, when he was about to be crucified, he was saved at the last minute. Like, it's completely consistent. There's no inconsistency here.
Here is the bigger problem. Islam's idea that Jesus was not crucified, but that somebody else was crucified instead of him, is an idea that came before Islam within certain sects and heretical beliefs and movements within Christianity. Crucifixion denial, that Jesus was not crucified, and substitution hypothesis, that somebody else was killed instead of Jesus, are ideas that are found in docetic Christian beliefs or Gnostic Christian beliefs, or movements like the Bogomilists or Monophysites who believe that Jesus was only fully divine, not fully human, or not part human. But what makes them so different from the Islamic idea is that they have a reason to believe that Jesus was not killed. What all of these movements and beliefs have in common is that they believe Jesus was divine, or he was of a different nature. Because of that, they developed the idea that if Jesus is divine, if he is God, if he's not at all human, then it doesn't make sense for Jesus to be killed on the cross, to be crucified, to suffer, and to die. Which is why these movements established certain ideas, such as that Jesus did not actually die, but that there was only a representation of Jesus on the cross. So it makes sense for these people to adopt such a belief. It doesn't make sense for Islam.
American fool. Failure is your destiny.
Then he says that, oh, these are heretical beliefs. First of all, how you as an atheist are saying that these are heretical beliefs? Like, you're not a Christian.
Stop it. Get some help.
like Bishop Apos all of a sudden declared the Gnostics to be heretics. Like, on what ground are you saying these are heretics? Like, you're not a Christian. You don't believe in Christianity. He said that it doesn't make sense in Islam for Jesus to be killed that way, which is not true, because while it is true that in Islam we don't believe that Jesus is divine, but that doesn't mean that Jesus is like some random person from the street. Like, he's still the prophet of God, right? And because he's a prophet of God, he has a connection with God, and there are many examples of God saving his prophets. So it's not out of the norm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save Jesus at that moment. As a matter of fact, it happened all the time. So it makes perfect sense for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save him. It's not out of the norm. Again, remember the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he was saved from the fire. The example of Musa alayhi salam, where he was saved from Pharaoh, right? And on top of it, remember the example of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, where he basically was saved during the incident of Jamil, where Jamil Jamil is basically the wife of Abu Lahab. When she heard that there was a verse of the Quran that was revealed about her husband, she came to kill the Prophet, and then the Prophet was sitting behind Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu, and he was worried, and he told the Prophet, and the Prophet said nothing will happen. And when she came, even though he was sitting right there, she couldn't see him, right? Again, this is a miracle. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually saved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by using a miracle. Same way he saved Jesus alayhi salam through a miracle. So it's not out of the norm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save his prophet. If you guys like the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support me, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. Links will be in the description. And inshallah, I'll see you guys next time. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.